My career started in 1959 when I had an electrical apprenticeship with Strand Electric, which were doing the installation on these studios. Because I lived in Harrow, and Strand Electric were based in Covent Garden. They sent me here because they knew it would be easier for me to get backwards and forwards to work. When I arrived, all of the walls were all up. The door was in, but not down because it hadn't been connected at that point. And we were just starting basically on putting all the trunkings and getting everything ready for the installation. I spent, I think, one of the little jobs I had here actually was when the first show was on here, Arabian Nights, I had to go and sit up on the gantry by where all the lighting trunking was and put my hand in it to check how warm the cables were getting, because this was probably the biggest installation at that time, well, certainly that Strand Electric had ever done, and they were worried that they might not have got the right amount of cable up there. So that was my first little job at doing that. After that, we then left here for a while, but I then was working with an electrician called Les Schuff, and we came back here just as a pair, and we were doing all sorts of little jobs in all the other studios, 1, 2 and 4, plus the bar as well, which was a very popular place in Wembley Studios. Then I got married in '66, and I was about to be sent by Strand Electric. I'd just become an electrician about a year or so before, and I was being sent to Coventry to work on a Mecca bingo hall. But luckily enough, a job became vacant here, which they wanted 6 people to do holiday relief. And the man who was in charge of the lighting used to drink in the same pub as I drank in. And I said to him one day, because I wanted to come back, I didn't really want to go to Coventry, wanted to come back here, do a little bit of installation. I said, couldn't get me a job back in the studios, Dave. Could you? Went, do you want to come and work in the studios? And I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind. So nothing happened. And then in June, I got a phone call, actually here, while I was here, to go and collect my cards on the Friday, because I was starting here as an electrician on the Monday. So lighting. And in them days, I was told my wages would be £23 a week. I was earning about £13 a week as an electrician. So when I arrived here on the Monday morning, Dave West came up to me and said, oh, I've made a mistake on your wages. So I said, oh yeah, what's that? Oh, well, here we go, £20 a week. He said, it's not 23, it's £26 a week. So I was like, wow, suddenly I've doubled my wages, I've got a nice job. And all they said to us was, at the end of the holiday period, we're going to keep 2 of you on. And I was lucky enough to be one of those people. I then worked for Rediffusion in all the different studios on all sorts of programs. My favourite, obviously, because I was 23 years old at the time, was Ready, Steady, Go, which was like, and I had been a mod all my life from when modernism came out. So it was the height of being a mod, actually being able to work. And I worked on the first TV appearance of Jimi Hendrix, which was a fantastic. It was like altogether another experience, seeing somebody that good actually live 4 foot away from you. So then obviously, unfortunately, in '68, Rediffusion lost the licence, the London 5-day licence, and London Weekend took over these studios. Well, the first night, we all went on strike. For some, I honestly can't really remember, but I think it was over some payment they'd promised us, and they weren't going to give it to us. So their first night on air, gone. But they were also run by some people who thought British independent television, commercial television, needed to be a bit more highbrow. So they started to put on programmes that really, on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, that really weren't that entertaining for the bulk of the general public. And so they got into a bit of trouble, and I think Rupert Murdoch came in and put some money into it, and suddenly we started doing programmes that everybody wanted to see. In this studio, for instance, you could get a double-decker bus, so on the buses, they could drive a bus in here. Budgie, he did a thing with lots of pound notes on the floor and a fan blew them all away for the opening title. So all sorts of things that you couldn't really do in any of the other studios on this site, you were able to do in here. So it was, and we did all sorts of big productions with orchestras, ballet. I mean, it was really, and of course the famous Nina Simone show was shot in this studio, in the round. Stanley Baxter started here. Vicky Carr was here. There was all sorts of big stars at that time. There was in the old studios. We did a pub which I can't remember the name of now, but it had Ray Martin and Kathy Kirby as the two stars of it. It was quite a big deal. We also, I'm pretty sure this was the studios where Chaz and Dave did their famous Christmas show with Eric Clapton. So it was, these were really buzzy, good places to come and work. Unfortunately for me personally, because I was still living in the Harrow area, London Weekend decided to move to the South Bank, which was brilliant for them, to be honest. But these studios, I then was able, and let me think, with London Weekend, we did one series, because we used to always do U-Bet in either Shepperton or Pinewood, but for whatever reason, they were probably too busy. Lee International had this at the time, and we came in, and we only wanted 4 walls, which is what this was. So we did a series of U-Bet in here. I think it might have been, I think it was Matthew Kelly at the time was the star of it. But we had what we did, we built our own control room. So it was just, and they had an OB truck outside. And it was nice because they just shot Yentl, the Barbra Streisand film, had just been in here just prior to us coming. So it was really quite a buzzy place because all the guys who were working it were still talking about how Barbara used to put on a party for them every Friday. You know, it was brilliant when we went home. And then I was able in 2004 I retired from London Weekend, and my wife said to me, "What are you going to do? You're only 60 years old, you're not going to be stuck around here all day, are you?" So I said, "Honestly, don't." I said, "I'm not going to really go out looking for work," but within a short period of time, Al Gurdon phoned me and gave me a job, which was at the BBC. But it meant that I was now back working, and Tom Kinane, also, who I'd worked with a lot at London Weekend. In fact, when Tom arrived at London Weekend as a young lighting electrician, I looked after him, got him trained up to be a console operator, and he always remembered. And then obviously he wanted to light and became very successful at it. So he then said, "Oh, you're doing some work now." So yeah, so then Al was doing the X Factor, the first series of X Factor here, but he had to go and do another job somewhere else. So he asked Tom to do it, and Tom brought me in to be the console operator. So I then did half a series of the first X Factor, the one that poor Steve Brookstein won, and really ended up working in Pizza Express, singing it on the odd occasion. So I felt really sorry for him. He was really almost fitted up really by the way it was done. Then after that, Al got another job in here with Jeff Posner. It was a series of light entertainment shows with people like Tom Jones, Michael Bublé. They were like the star each week. I can't remember exactly what that was called, but it was a really nice little show. I can't remember how many weeks that ran for, but it was a nice little job here, you know, and it was still with the old Galaxy, which was always my favourite because that's what I've been brought up with. So really, as the Congo came in, I packed up, and really, the one thing I always think about these studios, I've had a really enjoyable time every time I've been here. Well, when I arrived, the first morning I came here, there was a ladder that went from the floor to the roof where the opening of the door. And there was like scaffolding all across it. So I said, "Oh, you want to go up there and have a look round?" I think just to test whether I could actually climb a ladder or not. So I climbed up the ladder, which I've never had a problem with, to be honest, and had a look round. But we had two electricians who were putting up the scaffold, the trunking round the walls, and they were doing it using a water level. And if you ever really have a good look at all this, it's absolutely level. There is no wherever the work they did was always spot on. But what I do remember, as I got a bit older, the hoists which the lighting bars were on, they needed connecting up in situ. So we used to put a couple of scaffold poles across and have like a small harness. And there were two proper electricians who refused to do that job. They said it was too dangerous. But me being a silly apprentice and thinking I can do that, I used to go out and just connect up. And it was quite, I never felt any danger with it, but it was quite enjoyable to actually be doing something that was very important to the studio, to be honest. Yeah. To me, as a young boy apprentice, I wouldn't have a clue what challenges that, but they had some really good engineers, and the guy who was a former guy named Bill Baker was a very, very experienced man on doing. Because what you have to remember about Strand Electric was that they did all the lighting installations in the whole of the West End. You know, the Opera House, the Albert Hall, every job that of any size, we used to light all the ice shows at Wembley Arena as it was then. So we were used to doing big installations, really, you know. But I think because with a theatre, it's a slightly different way of setting up. You know, you've got your audience, you've got your stage, so the lighting is to the sides and from the audience, and of course across the circles. But here, of course, it was a totally different way of lighting, and also the amount of light and the size. You know, like 5Ks, 2Ks, which you don't get a lot of in the theatre really. But I remember the first show that was in here. They did actually shoot it in colour, although it was being shot in colour for America, and they used arc lights on it. So all of the electricians who worked there, this is a lovely story really, all insisted that they get a pair of sunglasses, and they had to be Polaroid sunglasses. So anybody who was working on the floor was wearing sunglasses because of the arc lights. I don't know what they did when they were working on the films, because a lot of these old guys, and they were a lot of sort of older men who had actually worked with arc lights in the film studio, so it wasn't like they weren't used to doing it. But no, we've got to have sunglasses, because the unions in those days were incredibly strong. In fact, I didn't even actually realise until I read about it recently that I always used to wonder why I used to sit in the lighting box when I was a console operator on my own, and the lighting director would be with the engineers downstairs. It was because apparently ACTT and the ETU weren't allowed to be in the same room together. Right, you just think, really? But they never did. They never sat with you. In fact, I can remember once I was up in this studio on a show, and 2 cyc lights blew, 2 individual bulbs, and the lighting director came from downstairs, came up, and I said, sorry, Ted, we've lost 2 bulbs out. He said, well, don't let that happen again. And I thought, well, how would I be able to not let that happen again? It's not my fault they blew, that's what happens. But there we go. What I can remember is the first show in here, which I was still a young apprentice at the time, was Arabian Nights, and they had all sorts of animals on it, including an elephant, although not everybody remembers the elephant, which was, they were all kept outside along the fence of the building, in cages obviously. And I always remember I was given the job of checking how warm the cables were getting on the lighting side of things. So I was sitting up there, and obviously I was able to watch what was going on. And and I'm sure it was the elephant, they put all of the titles on the studio floor because the whole room was open. And the elephant was, and they were in like sand, painted in with, but the floor was covered with sand. And as it walked across, it messed them all up. And it was really quite a clever idea, you know, at the time. So, in fact, that might even be on the BFI piece of film that you've been able to get hold of. Yeah, so And also there was quite a lot of going on because there were loads and loads of extras here, and they were all in very skimpy outfits. So there was quite a lot of stuff that shouldn't be going on backstage, really. I always remember that bit. The first show I worked on was Take Your Pick, which was a little quiz show with Michael Miles. Double Your Money, obviously, with Huey Green. But my favourite, obviously, was Ready, Steady, Go, because I loved that R&B music, and I still do to this day. And being able to see artists of the calibre of The Who, Jimi Hendrix. I also was lucky enough to work on the very last edition of Ready, Steady, Go, and Mick Jagger, Chris Farlow did a duet, the Small Faces were in there, Donovan, everybody who was anybody at that time in the 60s was on that show at some time or other. And there is a famous story of the Beatles when they were on it, was that at the front of the building, in the old building, along the road, there were dressing rooms, and the Beatles were in one of those dressing rooms, and fans were passing things through for autographs, and they had one of their people signing their autographs for them. So it was a bit sad for all those people who think they've got the Beatles autograph. The other people I remember seeing here at that time on that show was Stevie Wonder, who was Little Stevie Wonder at the time, Sonny and Cher, James Brown. So there were some massive, massive stars of that time in this building. Well, Jimi Hendrix, I always remember his manager was a guy called Chas Chandler, who was the bass player in the Animals, or had been the bass player in the Animals. And they walked in. Jimi Hendrix wasn't very tall, actually. And the two people in his band, Noel Redding, the bass player, and Mitch Mitchell, the drummer, were really little guys to make him look a little bit bigger, because he really was probably my stamp, which isn't, as you probably noticed, very big. But when he plugged his guitar in and he did Hey Joe, all the hairs on the back of my neck just stood up because it was fantastic. He walked in, he had a pair of Chelsea boots, and I always remember this, which were a bit down at heel. He had a pair of red velvet trousers on and a white shirt, but boy, could that boy play. And it was fantastic for those 3 minutes while he played in there. It really was.
Weekends.
Well, rediffusion actually made us all redundant, or paid us all off. I think, because I'd been here for 18 months at the time, you got a portion of your wages. So I'd got, you got like a week's wage money, you know, so I'd got a week and a half's money. Some guys here got £1,000. Now in 1968, that was a reasonable sum of money, probably near enough a year's salary. Not, well, it wasn't a year's salary, but a good lump that you could actually do something with. And what happened was as well, Rediffusion kindly, because we were leaving there on the Friday and we were starting with London Weekend on the Monday, Rediffusion paid us the Saturday and Sunday, which they didn't have to do, but which is what they did. So come the start, we then started working with London Weekend. I think it was in about the May and the changeover. I can't remember when the actual date for the changeover was. But the first night, the big opening night, well, we'd had a dispute with them over something. I think it was probably over money. But it wasn't really that up with all what was going on at the time, because I was just like a young lad here, really. And we went on strike. As soon as they went on air at 8 o'clock, we pulled the plug, and that was the end of their first night, which was really, really sad looking back on it now, but at the time. But it actually bucked their ideas up, and whatever we were after, they gave us it. Then after that, London Weekend Television had some funny ideas about what people should be watching on commercial television. And they tried very hard to train people to like it, but the general public, being brought up on light entertainment, comedy, over the weekends, weren't really ready for that. Probably nowadays, you probably could get away with it a bit more, because you've got so many channels, you can dedicate one to the type of programme that they were trying to get people to watch. they were lovely shows to work on because they were mostly quite big shows, big orchestral concerts, you know, some big. I remember the first colour play I did here was a Chekhov, the Seagull, in this studio where we're sitting now, with a lighting designer called Tony Heifer, who actually wrote for all of us how to light in colour, because up to that point everything we'd done was been black and white. And in fact, even then, when colour started, we had to have an old like black and white TV, so that, because you probably understand this as well as everybody else, that certain colours come up the same grey, so you could end up with just like a grey smog for a LE show, lovely in colour, awful in black and white. So we had to be very aware that most of the British public was still watching programmes in black and white and had to make some decent black and white pictures. Colour come into television, obviously firstly with the BBC, as all these things happen, but London Weekend were hoping to start colour TV, and we were doing a series called Upstairs Downstairs, which was a massive show in those days. But we wanted some payment, obviously. We wanted some payment to work in colour because of the extra heat. You know, we had to put up with more lighting, more rigging, so we expected to be looked after properly in that respect. But London Weekend decided that wasn't going to happen. So the first 7 episodes of Upstairs Downstairs were shot in black and white. I'm not even sure if they didn't put them in colour for America, but I won't swear to that. Anyway, but I always remember I was working actually on the first colour one as a console operator, and the first shot was through the window, which was white. The walls of the house were grey. Down through the window, you could see the black and white tiles on the floor. The maid was washing the floor in her black uniform and white collar. And as the camera zoomed in, she turned her head to look up as if something had happened outside the window. And there was a colour. And I've always remembered that and think to myself, wow, that was such a clever way of introducing colour into that programme. And it stayed with me for all this. And actually, once it was shot in colour, it was quite an incredible show to it. But the funny thing about that programme was the upstairs downstairs bit didn't just happen on the studio floor, it happened in the galleries as well. So you had like the lighting designer, the costume designer, the set designer, the producers and the directors all thought of themselves as upstairs, and they actually used to try and treat us like downstairs people. It was quite incredible. You could not believe in this day and age that that's how we were treated. It was incredible. People just used to ignore you, like talk around you. Just you were there because you had to be there. They didn't really want you there because you weren't part of this, in their little minds, upstairs gig that was going on. It was, and it really was like that. You just thought, my God, really, if you could only watch yourselves. But they all came from, in those days, all those jobs came from a slightly different type of people than you get nowadays. You get all sorts now, don't you? Really, you do. The problem with changing to colour was that obviously for us as crew, we were going to expect to do a lot more rigging, a lot more heat in the studios, more glare in your eyes, whatever way you wanted to go. So obviously we asked for more money. London Weekend decided that that wasn't going to happen. So the first, I think, 6 or 7 episodes of Upstairs Downstairs were all shot in black and white until there was a shift by them to actually think, well, actually, these guys are probably right. We probably do need to give them a little bit more money, and that's what happened. And so we then were quite happy to work in colour. ITV's or LWT's comedy input was really quite strong at the beginning, with shows like On the Buses, Please Sir, etc., etc. But on the buses was great because these studios, the door height is such that you can get a double-decker bus in here. So they could do all the opening titles with a bus driving round in here. The sets were, they could build big enough. The depot could be built here, so they didn't have to go to Wood Green Bus Garage, which is what they had to do once we'd moved to the South Bank, because the door heights aren't even high enough for a single-decker bus. So it was, but the first series actually, the mother, Reg Varney's mother, was played by Cicely Courtnidge, who was a very famous actress in the 30s, was like old enough to be his mother, obviously, at the time. And the first thing they asked her to do was fry an egg. And she looked at them and said, "But I don't know how to fry an egg, I've never actually," because she was part of a very famous acting duo who were obviously very wealthy people who didn't actually ever have to do that. So come the second series, poor old Cicely was out and Doris Hare took her place, who actually could fry an egg.
You need a bit of authenticity.
Well, this is it, yeah.
Don't you?
As most of it was built around the kitchen table when they weren't in the bus garage. It was a good time to work in this industry, to be honest with you. The early days, there was lots of different types of programs. You would be working, one day you'd be working on a ballet. The next day you'd be working on a political program. The next day you might be out on Police 5. There was so much variety. So when you were learning your trade with doing all these different types of programs, heavy drama, light drama, you can't think of it. I used to walk along my road looking in people's houses to see how light was working from their television, so that when you come to work and they'd say, "Well, we want to make it look like they've got the TV on in that room." "Oh, I mean, yeah, I was looking at that last night, so I can perhaps just show you. What do you think of this idea?" "That's a good idea, let's do that," you know. One of my best cues ever was on Upstairs Downstairs here, and it was a candle shop. The maid struck the match so that I got the flare, so the light came up. She put the light to the candle started to light and then went down, so I've come down, and then it burst into light again, up. The director looked at the lighting director, not me, remember, and he went, "Well done, Trevor," and Trevor went, "No, it was him." So that was kind of him to do that. Like, hold up here a minute, do you know anything about us? Yeah, so that was a really you know, one of those things that you just think, "Oh, crikey, I really did that well." So you didn't have to do a retake, you know. Great, yeah. At London Weekend, we've been producing a programme called You Bet, which needed big studio space. So we used to shoot it at either Shepperton or Pinewood. But for whatever reason, those studios weren't available. So this being the next biggest one, we came here. And it's Lee International at the time, so it was just a four-wall. So we bought our own. We put our own light in. In fact, we put it up in a corner, in a shed. In fact, with a Galaxy in there and an air conditioning unit, because the Galaxy didn't like being too warm, so you had to look after that. You could freeze, but that couldn't. So, but yeah, and it was just after. Barbara Streisand had shot Yentl here, so the place was still buzzing from that, because apparently she was a fantastic person to work for. I actually did do an interview with her in the Dorchester, and she kept us waiting for 5 hours, so I didn't think much of her, but apparently the crew, because she used to throw a party every week for them as a thank you for all their hard work. But this was a bit like it is now, really. It was black walls and, you know, it was a bit dirtier than this, to be honest with you. The next time I came here was when Fountain had taken over. It was for the X Factor, and Tom Kinane was taken over from Alex Gurdon, because Al had got another probably massive job somewhere. So Tom asked me to come in as the generic console operator, and we had Sven Pedersen was the moving light man. And so that was another, back we came, and it was a nice show to work on. It was the very first one, so it was a one that Steve Brookstein one. But it was lovely to come back and see the place. But it was sad as well because at that time when I was here originally, there were still the old studios. There was the paint shop. There was all the trade shops. The big prop store. There was the OB garage, and all that had gone. And it was now McDonald's and Lidl's and all sorts of other shops, really. And this was still standing proudly, the old Studio 5, or as it's now known, A and B. Yeah, sad times really, but still lovely to see it all. Yeah. No, what you had was in the corner, you had a makeup room, like this bit, like that bit, just outside the door. Like you went round. It was the makeup room. Then I think it must have been general engineer, like vision control and things were there. Sound were there. Director box there, but the directors didn't look actually out of the window. The window was there, but the monitors were there, so they sat along there. Then the next room along was lighting, where we had this telephone system of patching the dimmers to the outlets, because they had more outlets obviously than dimmers in them days. And we had two monitors. We had a change monitor for whatever camera, and then off on-air monitor just above us. And we looking this way with the old Compton Strand boards. And the dimmer rooms were all up there, and two rooms with, in fact, one of the windows, we used to use it as our like our site hut once the job was up and running. We used to be out in the yard, and we were messing about with some little third of a pint kind of milk bottles, and I threw one to one of the other apprentices, and he leant out of the way, and it hit the window and cracked it. So, here we go, like, so, and a big crack as well, and it was a massive old bit of glass up there. And so we had to cook up a story about how I had tripped as I came in the room, and the bottle flew out of my hand and hit the window, and we've had to, so they had to then get the glaziers to come back and put a new bit of window up there, so, which isn't even there now, is it? I don't think. No, it's not there. No. Yeah.
We haven't got any windows into here anymore.
I only have my memories of this place, of this site, when it was a really buzzy, complete entertainment industry site. The whole place was just geared to making TV programs. I have to say, in a sentence, it was a very enjoyable time for my life, always. It's going to be really missed, unfortunately, this place, because where else can you get a studio where you can have a massive audience at one side and a really big stage at the other? There is nowhere else as good as this, in my opinion. Studio One at the London Studios has got a reasonable sized audience, not like you can get in here. TC1 is a big studio, but it's nowhere near the size of this place, It's just so sad, really, to think. I always thought that this site had a preservation order on it of the entertainment industry, but obviously not, because money talks. And unfortunately, when you look around the outside of this building, the blocks and blocks of flats that are going up, that you couldn't sustain this place unless it was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And then you still probably wouldn't get the money that you could get with the amount of flats you could get on this site. Sad, but the reality is money always talks.